Andrew Keane, this man doesn't need an introduction. Part British, part American, part blogger, part speaker, part entrepreneur, part author. What are you?
I'm an entrepreneur, broadcaster and a writer. I'm not a blogger though. I do have a blog, but I put repurposed content. I would never blog. Never give my content away for free. Or if I do, I would do it on a high-profile website, not on my own.
You're not a pirate, like the discussion we checked out earlier this day?
I am a pirate in the sense that I steal. I don't steal traditional content, but I definitely steal people's ideas. I steal identities. I think we're all pirates. I'm not sure if I would ever vote for the Pirate Party. I don't have their simplistic view of the world between the people who are all good and the big media companies that are bad. But I've got nothing against the notion of piracy as an intellectual concept.
But the piracy like Wikileaks or Pirate Bay, I mean, that's stealing or?
I think Pirate Bay is, I think there's a distinction between Wikileaks and the torrents. I'm not in favor of these technologies and websites and file sharing services that encourage the stealing of traditional content, books, movies, music. I think that's a bad thing. I'm not opposed to WikiLeaks though. I think what they're doing is good. I think the WikiLeaks story is complex. Clearly some of the personalities involved are, some are better than others, but that's not really the issue. I think the issue with WikiLeaks is putting out important political information that otherwise wouldn't have come out. You're not stealing content in the way in which you're stealing content from a book or an author. The publishing of WikiLeaks material doesn't steal revenue from artists, from writers or filmmakers or musicians. So I'm ambivalent about WikiLeaks. I see some of the excesses. I think there's some areas where it's probably publishing of material shouldn't be encouraged. But in principle, I'm in favor of open government. I believe that a government where people are informed of what's happening in the world is a much better government than one that isn't. What concerns me about WikiLeaks, and this comes perhaps to my first book, Call to the Amateur, is that the information on WikiLeaks is raw and it needs to be digested. I mean, for most people, they're not going to really read WikiLeaks, and a lot of the information on it is complex. It needs context, it needs the perspective of an experienced journalist.
Is it more about the affection for the WikiLeaks hype, other than reading the documents?
I don't know who's really reading the documents, and I'm not sure what people would get from those documents. I think that it needs to be filtered. So I'm all in favor of WikiLeaks, but I'd rather read WikiLeaks via the New York Times or the London Guardian than the pure sewage on WikiLeaks. I don't have the time or the experience or the knowledge to read WikiLeaks for myself and come to any judgment. I don't know what information on WikiLeaks is more revealing than others, and I don't have the time to trawl through hundreds of leaked documents. And if I don't have it, and I'm a professional writer, then I don't know who does. So I don't think WikiLeaks is a solution to the crisis of journalism. I think it's a good development in terms of making government more accountable and making democracy richer. But you still, I think, if anything, it shows the need for a professional journalist class, a curator class who can read these documents carefully, who are honest, who are not in the pocket of a corporation or a political party, and to write about it in a coherent way so that ordinary citizens understand what's going on.
Is this what you're defining, a new way of social media integrity?
Well, I'm not a big fan. I mean, Alexander is the theorist of integrity.
Alexander Bart?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan necessarily of the idea of integrity, although when I say that I don't have integrity, Alexander reminds me that that's a classic manifestation of integrity. So we're all stuck in this integrity trap.
Is social media the next trap?
I think social media is a massive trap. It's got nothing necessarily to do with integrity. My next book is about social media. The trap of always being watched, of watching ourselves, the trap of all these new social media companies, obviously from Twitter and Facebook, the classic examples, and LinkedIn. But all these new startups, Robert Scoble talked about them today in a less uncritical way, But we're building all these startups, all these apps, all these web services, all these geolocation services that reveal where we are. And as we live more and more on the internet, and as Scoble says, the virtual and the real become confused, we are living in public. And I'm not convinced that living in public or life in public is necessarily a good thing. And I'm not quite...
So we are avatars.
We're not avatars, we're the reverse of avatars, we're human beings. Avatars is the old world, avatars is Second Life. Avatars is Web 2.0. Web 3.0 is when the human becomes virtual, but in a real sense.
Virtual in a real sense? Is what your book is about?
The virtual and the real are indistinguishable. We live in the social contract, in the social network, the movie.
Like your online identity in social network?
The social network movie, the fictional version of Sean Parker, who was acted by Justin Timberlake, said first we lived in cities, first we lived in the countryside, then we lived in cities, now we live online. And I think he's right, and as we live online, so the virtual and the physical become confused. Web 2.0, we were all avatars in Second Life. Web 3.0, Second Life becomes First Life. There's no distinction between the online world and the physical world.
So there will be confusion all over the way.
It's not a confusion. That's the wrong way. It's only a confusion if you look at it from the physical 20th century. It's reality, but reality is in part virtual in the 21st century. What concerns me, I'm not necessarily concerned about that. I think it's an inevitability. I prefer to live physically, and I'm old enough to live out the rest of my life physically. I'm not sure if my children or the children of my children will have that luxury. But what concerns me is as the physical world becomes more virtual, and as we all live on the network, we're revealing everything about ourselves, we're undermining our essential humanness, and that's what my book is about.